famous mitzvah, but tzedek tishbot amitecha. You should judge righteously those around you. I'm loosely translating it. So we have essentially the following question. Do I personally have a right to judge you? Yes or no? Ever? Do I ever have a right to judge you? And if the answer is no, why not?
Because you're not in their shoes.
I'm never in your shoes. Maybe if I ask you to share with me your shoe size and what it's like to be inside those shoes, maybe I can get some impression. But essentially, where do we actually have anywhere in the Torah that permits me to judge you? And the answer is, outside of Beis Din, outside of an actual court of law, where people might go in order to adjudicate a difference that they're not able to, for whatever reason, good or bad, for whatever reason, they're not able to figure out how to come to an agreement. So then it might be a monetary issue, it might be some other claim. So that's what Bet Din, that's what a court of law is for. And there, Bet Din actually is forced to take a position. They have to take a position. If it's a much more serious situation, like a murder case requires witnesses, and it can't just be second-hand witnesses, it has to be first-hand eyewitnesses. And the judges can't give a perfect judgment. So for example, if a person's given a fine and he doesn't have the money to pay it back, now he's got to go and work even harder, and that affects financial pressure on the family that's already under financial pressure. So the judges who are giving this fine, they can't take into account the fact that the wife is not able to work and she's stuck home with the children, and for whatever, and there's a disability in the class in amongst the children. There's so many other issues that no, this man stole or took money illegally and now has to pay back plus a fine. So the judges can't take into account a bigger picture. When we declare God is Dayan HaEmet, He is the real judge. Emet really means real. The Christian translation which we're stuck with is truth, and it's not a bad translation. It just doesn't fully encapsulate what the word emet means. Emet is the last letter of the Hebrew alphabet, Aleph and Taf, and the middle one, the exact juxtaposition of the middle letter is Mem, to tell you that true reality has to be the full picture from beginning to end, and only God has that full picture. So I'm never allowed to judge you in any other situation outside of Bet Din, and even when Bet Din judges, it's not a perfect judgment. Especially if someone gets the death penalty, and there are witnesses, and it's 100% clear that this person gets, well, what about the wife and children? How are they going to support each other? But they can't take it all into account. It's astonishing. So we're in a world where even in the perfect Bet Din or Sanhedrin, it's not a perfect judgment. Only God is a perfect judge. So this picture is illustrating for us something that's quite interesting. If I'm never allowed in a relationship to judge you, well, what am I supposed to do with my thoughts? Because I'm constantly judging, whether I like it or not. I'm assessing whether it's based on appearance or the little knowledge I do have, or I take a child's behavior as a reflection of the parents. That's a judgment. I'm constantly judging. What am I supposed to do with my thoughts? So what we're going to explore is the following. In Pirkei Avos, we've got 3 statements in different places that talk about my right to judge. One of them is in chapter 4, Mishnah 8, which tells us, Al tadin yechidi, don't judge alone. She'ein dan yechidi ela echad. There's only one person who can judge, and that's God. Only He's allowed to judge alone. And we're not talking about, even in Bet Din, one judge would not be allowed to judge. You need a minimum of 3. And it always has to be an odd number. The second level of Bet Din is 23. The highest level is 71. So no one is allowed to judge because only God can judge. The obvious explanation for that is He's the Emet, He's the Dayan HaEmet, He's the true judge who's got the full picture, the real picture. Which means to say that He's got the panoramic view of why this person was sent into this world in the first place, what mistakes they came back to fix from a previous Gilgal. That's a much bigger, a broader picture than I can ever see in front of my eyes. So of course Hashem has the full picture. So that's number one. I cannot judge. Number two, if I can't control my thoughts, where I so easily judge you, whether the person I'm judging is my own spouse or my own child or my student or my co-worker or my boss or whoever it is or someone that I'm dealing with as a client, if I can't let go of my judgments are hurting my impression of this person, then I have to go to another Mishnah which makes the following statement, and it's what you brought up earlier. Al tadin et chaverecha, don't judge your friend until shitagia linkoima, you are in his place, in his shoes, literally in his place. But that's a strange thing to say. Will I ever be in your place? Will I ever have your background, your education, the knowledge of how you were parented and raised, and the class and the school and the parent teachers you had, that I will never be in your place? So in a funny way, it's almost like saying, this is another reason I can't judge you, because I'll never know what the big picture is coming from your perspective. And that's part of why this is so helpful, because it immediately becomes clear from our panoramic view of this that both are correct and neither are wrong. What happens if I can't control myself? I still can't help judge you. So comes along another Mishnah. This is Perek Aleph Mishnah Vav, which is quite astonishing if you think about it. It says, "V'havei dan et kol ha'adam l'chapschus." Judge every single person on the side of merit. Now this is quite extraordinary. Why? Because what the Torah is actually telling me, and it's based on the verse, "B'tzedek tishpoit amitecha." Judge your friends righteously. What does it mean, b'tzedek, righteously? And this is quite extraordinary. I heard you say what you said. I saw what you did. So the way my brain is wired is I'm going to make a judgment based on that. Comes along God and tells Moses, who tells the Zkanim, who tells the Nevi'im, who tells the Anshe Knesset Gdola, and they commit this to writing, that if I see something and I make a judgment, but I've got two options, either to judge based on what I saw and heard, or if there's anywhere in my creative imagination that would put you into a positive light, a favorable interpretation, which of the two should I select? The one I heard and saw with my own eyes, and my brain then came up with an assessment, its own judgment of you? Or I should try and find somewhere in my creative imagination, even if it would be completely bizarre, but if it's possible to come up with some other way of looking at this, which of the two does the Torah actually tell me to select? Number two. That's astonishing. I'm a witness. I heard and saw, and yet you're telling me, God, that to not rely on what I think I saw and heard, but to give it a twist. I'll give you an extreme example. This was told to me by Rabbi Shimon Schwab of blessed memory, and since then I do believe it's recorded. Rabbi Shimon Schwab escaped from Germany, Berlin, when he was 19 years old. He was already a rabbi, and I think did I share with you that he told me this? I don't think I've told you this story, but I'm just adding a piece here, is that there was a Gestapo officer who was responsible for some sort of squad that was looking for rabbis to execute publicly, because this would really undermine the leadership and would weaken our faith in God, because our leaders are being executed publicly. So he was on the run. Rabbi Shimon Schwab was on the run, running away from this particular squad, and he told me something very interesting. He said he would sleep at night with his clothes on and his shoes, because if he was taken in the middle of the night and he was wearing his Shabbos clothes because he didn't want to be paraded in the street with his pajamas. He wanted to die with dignity, al Kiddush Hashem. And he also told me that he learned that this Nazi officer actually died at the age of 96 in Argentina. And he believes, this is his personal opinion, that Hashem gave him that long life because he saved his life. He didn't save his life deliberately, that wasn't his intent, he was actually trying to kill him. But in that attempt, he actually ran away from Germany, arrived in America, and he became a rabbi in Baltimore for many years, and then eventually the Washington Heights community. This is just bonus information. The actual story I want to get to is, that was just interesting when you listen to a gadol, a veritable a giant in Torah, to hear his perspective, how he understood that this person had the merit, so to speak, of saving his life, even though that was not his intent. And because he saved his life, all the merits of having been a leader in the Baltimore and then Washington Heights community in Manhattan is accrued to this person who gets paid in this world. So that was his perspective. But the story I want to share with you is the following. He told me that when he was in Baltimore, he was on a bus going to New York, and the bus broke down. You know the story? It was something like 2 o'clock in the morning, and it was within walking distance of a service station. So the passengers were asked to leave the bus and go to the service station until they fixed the bus. He arrives at the service station, and to his absolute shock, he sees a congregant of his who's eating what appears to be some sort of a ham sandwich. And Rabbi Schwab described to me his dilemma. On the one hand, he has a mitzvah called Tochacha. Tochacha, unfortunately, we're stuck with a mistranslation, rebuke, reprimand, which I think has the connotation of anger or frustration or disappointment at the very least, when in fact the word Tochacha, Rashi tells us several times in Perek Chavdal and Chav Hey in Bereshis, Tochacha is a lashon birur dvarim. Tochacha is not reprimand, it's a clarification of things, meaning, why do you think it's a 6? And the other one says, well, why do you think it's a 9? So we'll come over this side. Oh, I see what you mean. And then there's a discussion, there's a clarification, birur dvarim. So he said, on the one hand, I have a mitzvah that if I see a Jew do something wrong, especially someone who's in my congregation, I have to correct them, gently ask what's going on over here. And then he said, on the other hand, I have a mitzvah to be done to judge favorably if I see someone doing something wrong. And there's somewhere in my creative imagination I could possibly dig and find some sort of explanation that would put him in a better light. Thirdly, he said, I was worried that if I do confront him, he might choke on the sandwich when he sees his rabbi at 2 o'clock in the morning in the same service station on a highway. So he decided he left the service station and waited for the bus to be fixed. He didn't want to embarrass his congregant. Then he told me that Erev Shabbos, he was doing his rounds of the hospital, and this gentleman was on the list. So he went to see him, and he found out that he has a condition, some sort of, I think if I remember correctly, some sort of problem with his liver, that he was warned if he's ever hungry, he should always have food with him, and if not, he should just eat whatever is available. And that's exactly what happened to him. So here's an extreme example where this is a ham sandwich. And I know who you are, and you're eating it in an isolated place, so it's so easy for me to fall into the judgment that on the quiet, on the side, you're not really a religious Jew, it's only you practice at home and not on the street. So that was too simple a judgment to come to, even though all the evidence kind of pointed in that direction. But on the other hand, he said, here's a Jew that I know personally, and therefore he has a chazaka. He has a how would you translate chazaka? A history track record of being an obedient Jew to Torah mitzvahs. He keeps Shabbos, so there has to be some explanation for why he would be breaking the laws of kashrut. So The reason I shared that story is because it's such I think, an extremely good example where a person couldn't find a reason, but assumed he must have a good reason. The question is, do I work with that assumption when I deal with my own spouse, my own children, my own co-workers? Because it seems clear the way we're listing this, God does not permit me to be your policeman. I'm not employed to be anyone's policeman. The only policeman I've been employed to be is of myself. But I have no mitzvah to judge you. I'm not in Beis Din, and I'm not a dayan. If I'm a dayan, then I can only judge it. And it's not you I'm judging the information and giving a psak based on principles that I've studied as a dayan. I personally am not a dayan, I have smicha, but that doesn't make me a dayan. So then a dayan can paskin. He can give a legitimate, he might discuss it, but actually will discuss it with his two other colleagues. That's why you have to have three, so that when you ever have a vote, it's always going to have hopefully an odd number, so it'll be a majority of one at least. So outside of that, Pirkei Avos is suggesting I've got no right to judge you, because Ein Dan Yechidi Ela Echad, only God can judge. And if I can't control myself, I still want to judge you, then go to plan B, which is Al Tadin et Chavarecha Ad Shatagia Limkaimai. Don't judge him until you get to his place. That's also Pirkei Avos, Perek Dalet, a Perek Beis Mishnah Dalet. And then the last option is if I still can't control my thoughts, then look for some explanation, no matter how ridiculous it is, that puts him into a favorite line. So here's the question. Am I getting you off the hook with plan C, which is to judge you favorably? Or is it really more about me being able to go to sleep tonight and get along with you in the future? See, it's basically what we're being told. Yeah?
I just have a question, because it first it says don't judge.
Yes.
And then it's like, if you judge, or when you judge favorably.
Yes.
Favorably. So it's kind of like negating the don't judge.
Right.
So it's giving two different like directions of information. Like what are you supposed to, isn't it?
So
Because by basically like whatever, by changing it and saying if you're to judge favorably, then therefore you are allowed to judge.
So you're 100% correct. What it's really saying is I'm allowed to judge you favorably, not unfavorably.
Right, so it should have just said, don't judge your fellow unfavorably. So why is it like, don't judge your neighbor, and then it's like, pause in another spot. It's kind of,
it's giving, yes, you're right. It's giving, I think, my understanding is, it's giving me three options.
Yeah.
And if I can handle option number one, it's not my business. Your mistakes are not my business.
Right.
It goes so far that Lashon Hara, I know we don't usually say it like this, but this is how I understand it. I think it's very simple. Your mistakes are none of my business. So I have no business going around telling anyone about the mistakes I've witnessed about you.
Right, so I say like a copy.
Oh, you want to marry my daughter? Oh, that's my business. Oh, you want to go into you want to partner in business? Oh, now that's my business. So now I'm allowed to find out, and people should, on the references, share with me something that might be relevant, because now it's my business. But outside of exceptions like that, other people's mistakes are none of my business. And what Lashon Hara in a certain way is really doing is protecting each of us from being simply human and not going into the minds of other people. It's none of my business what other people's mistakes are. So I do believe that in answer to your question, my understanding is that we don't actually have an option to judge. What I'm being told is that judging favorably, that already is much more in the arena of emulating God. Because God knows there's a much bigger picture, and how do I know he favors this person, that he judges him favorably? The biggest proof is that that person woke up this morning. That means God hasn't given up hope in him. So the fact that God hasn't given up hope in that person, so how much more so should I not give up hope in them? So judging favorably, even as we use the expression creative imagination, I come up with something that's like bizarre, ridiculous explanation for why the person said or did what they did, that is going to be closer to God's mindset, so to speak, than my judging the person based on what I'm seeing and think and hearing. So it's telling me that the factors that feed into why a person is behaving right now might be beyond my ability to see. In this case, it's very simple, but it might be so beyond my ability to see that God is just saying, keep out of it. There's much, much more that you can't see. I think of a movie where the camera, I remember the first time I met Sean Connery, who was one of the Bond, James Bond, it was 007, was on the making of the film, You Only Live Twice. So my father was directing all the voiceovers of the old Bond films, and there was this huge volcano. It was shot in Italy, but the inside of the volcano was actually a huge set. It was a hill. On the outside, it was just canvas that looked like a hill, going to the size of a mountain. And on the inside, you went inside, and it looked like the inside of a volcano. You were inside a mountain. So I remember at the set, you had this. They were sending a rocket in the middle. I don't know if you ever remember seeing You Only Live Twice, but not you personally, but maybe a non-Jewish neighbor of yours watched it. I don't know. So in that movie, you had this huge rocket in the middle of the set, and there were about 5 cameras at different locations. There was a railway going around the inside of the mountain. This in Pinewood Studios. It was not a real mountain, but inside it really looked like that. And then you had all these actors and actresses waiting to come on cue. You had the sound technicians, the light technicians, etc. And then when the director screams silence and shoot, you don't have to remind yourself that you're just watching a movie. It's pure fake, 100% fake. But what's interesting is that when you actually watch the movie, you're only seeing it through the lens of a particular camera. And as the editor does a skillful job of moving from camera A to B, back to A to C, D, etc., you as in the audience, what you see is not real. The actors, by definition, are acting, duh. And even the words you're hearing are not their words, that's a script. Someone else wrote that for them. The whole thing is fake. What you see through the lens is not real. What you cannot see beyond that lens of actors waiting to come on cue, and the technicians, and the producer, and the director, what you don't see is real. So comes along God, essentially says, this world is so big. I'm not just talking about physically, but there's a history of how each person arrived in this world. And it's so intricate. You know, when sometimes we do geography between each other, we say, oh, that's such a coincidence because I know so-and-so. And you're meeting someone you've never met before, and you're already discussing people you know in common. And then the expression we say typically is such a small world. So someone recently told me it's not a true comment. It's really not a small world. It's a really big world. It just happens to be run very well. See, all coincidences happen on purpose. But God is the one who's mezavik zivugim. He's bringing people together. Whether it's clients in business, whether it's a marriage, whether it's the souls that enter the child who is born to us, and now we are parenting this child, parenting the second child, and I can't believe the third child is so different from the first two, and I'm tearing my hair out. As you can see, I don't have that much left. And I'm wondering, how did this happen? Where did this child come from? And God says, you know what, stop trying to judge. Don't even bother trying. This is a perfect world that is so perfectly measured that every single person that comes into my life is measured to flex some muscle inside me. Whether it's my patience, there's only one way to flex that, and that is provocation. Now that's interesting, because when I ask God to help me with my patience, what am I actually asking for? give me more chances to prove I can control my anger. Oh, so I'm actually asking for more provocation. So here I am asking Rabbi Shalom, please, I beg of you, help me have patience with this particular person. And who walks into the room and starts pressing my stress buttons? That's the person I'm talking about. God, why are you doing this to me? And God said, Rietti, I don't understand you. You asked me for patience with that person. So there's only one way you can get patience with that person is by getting exercises in dealing with that person. So every person that is brought into my life is actually my coach in some way to invite my mind, what am I going to think? How am I going to read your personality? Who says I should be reading your personality? So this is really part of what you would call Hilchas Machshava, the laws of thinking, where God tells me, keep to myself. Now it gets tricky when you're either a teacher or a parent, where sometimes you don't have much more than what you see in front of you, and you've got to make a judgment based on the situation. And there is some leeway there where our sages actually give us a little bit more wiggle room, where discipline is needed, and kids crave it. They're dying for discipline. Because who else are they going to get it from if not from mum and dad? If they're not going to get it in school, then they're going to have to see, well, if I tread over the line with the police, maybe they'll take me seriously. And I know, as for sure, if a child doesn't know boundaries, there's only one way for them to find out, and that's keep pushing the boundary till someone actually puts up a red flag or a fine or, God forbid, a prison sentence. I'll never forget a friend of mine told me the story he's from Australia, of a teenager who wanted the keys to the car, and the father said no. He said, I don't trust you because I'm scared you're going to go with your friends and drinking and not having drinking and driving. So the boy pushed and pushed. I swear, Dad, I swear, I promised I will not drink and drive. I swear. And it just got him finally, and he gave him the keys. So the boy, first thing he does, picks up his friends and buys a six-pack. And he gets in the car and starts drinking. He says, right now I'm drinking, I'm not driving. He puts the bottle down and then starts driving. Right now I'm driving, I'm not drinking. He got himself into a stupor, and he ended up hitting a pedestrian and killing him. And didn't know he killed him, but he hit this pedestrian who later died of the injuries. And in his panic, he reversed and he hit another person. He ends up in court, and he gets the sentence. And when asked, do you have anything to say for what you've done? And he turns to his father and says, Dad, why did you give me the keys? Now, what would be our initial reaction to that? It's almost like he's blaming his father for the mess he got himself into, when really that's manipulation. I agree the father shouldn't have given the keys, and now on retroactive the son can say that, but the point I'm really bringing out is kids need boundaries. And so we do have that requirement to be machaneh, which correctly translates, if you want to say it, as training. I'm here to train my kids. But training really means, it's not yes please once, it's yes please many times. Thank you. Many, many times. I know we're living in America here, it's not as common to say yes please and thank you. And in Israel, I know of one very, very, very well-respected mechaneches, educator, who's actually told people who've made aliyah to try and get their kids to stop saying please and thank you, because in the classroom they're going to get bullied for it, because they're going to appear as like, I personally don't agree with that, I really don't, but I'm not living in Israel, so I don't understand the territory, and from their perspective, I'm creating a candidate for a bully from my perspective. So if it's right, and the Torah clearly, you see it throughout the Tanakh, you see the Lashon Na, even Esav uses the Lashon of Na when he asks Yaakov to give him from the lentil soup, he's still saying please. That's how he was raised. But that's how he behaved as well. So, I'm getting off the subject slightly, but the point I'm bringing out is that chinuch is a training, and we have been given a lot of lee room to make mistakes. You've got 13 years for your son, 12 for your daughter. Many say that after that you're finished. You don't have an obligation of chinuch. Others will say actually continue to have an obligation to train your children, but essentially by 12 for a girl they mature faster, and 13 for a boy, that's when they are independently responsible and accountable for what they think, say and do. And I'm off the hook. In the sense that we actually make a blessing. Baruch shepatrani me'onesh hazeh. Thank you, God, for helping me raise this child, and now I am exempt from the consequences of their actions. Because till now, it's on my cheshbon, it's in my accounting for. I'm partially responsible for who my kid is till 12, 13. Then on, I can't play the victim card. The kid can play the victim card, but ultimately he's responsible. Any questions on these points? Comments? Criticism? So I'm gonna switch now to an area that plays a major role in my mind, and that's the world of bullying. I've just started it with the older grades. The younger grades we haven't started this. So if you've got daughters in the younger grades, we haven't gone there. We started a little bit with the older grades. Bullying is a very big subject today, and in some ways you might say it's overstated, but in other ways, if we understand the actual mechanics and where the Torah itself has clarity, because the Torah has clarity on everything. There's no such thing as the Torah not having an opinion on something, because that's simply impossible. Because God gave us His instructions for life, for living, for successful living. So it can't be that bullying is a new phenomenon. And the mechanics of bullying are also inside whatever clarity we're going to explore in the next few minutes. So in the world of bullying, it's got to a very serious stage, especially in America, where you've got a lot of research on the subject, especially because of high school shootings and even elementary school shootings, where an adult, sometimes a student or alumni, comes into the building and with an actual machine gun and other weapons starts killing what looks like indiscriminately. And so it's caught our attention on a national level. One could argue, well, in the Jewish schools we don't have that much bullying, but once we understand what is bullying, we're going to get a bigger clarity as to where it exists in my personal life. There are essentially three people in the bullying formula. Who are they? The bully, victim, and bystander. Now, what's interesting about the bystander, everyone knows who's the bully, and we can see who's the victim, but the bystander, interestingly, falls into three categories. There are three types of bystanders. You've got the bystander number one, who's actually agrees with the bully. That's why he's not interfering. He might even be cheering on the bully. He might even join in. Bystander number two does not agree with the bully, but is too afraid to stand up to the bully or interfere because he doesn't want to be the next victim. So he keeps quiet. Bystander number three is so outraged by the injustice of the bullying that he jumps in and does something about it. So now I'm going to ask you a very simple question. Who is arguably the greatest human being in world history? Moshe Rabbeinu. What do we know about Moses, about Moshe Rabbeinu? What do we know about him? Excellent. This is something very, very revealing. The Torah introduces us to the birth of Moshe Rabbeinu in chapter 2 of Shemos. In chapter 3, right at the very beginning, God actually communicates directly with Moses and Moshe Rabbeinu and tells him, "You are my man." Now Moshe Rabbeinu was so humble, it was a 7-day argument. I can't imagine arguing with God for 7 days, but Moshe Rabbeinu tried to get out out of the mission that he's being sent on. Mission impossible, take the Jewish people out of the land of Egypt and arrive at this mountain, and I'm going to give the Torah through you to the Jewish people, and this will be the instructions for all mankind. We're meant to be a light to all the nations. So the question begs, what qualified Moshe Rabbeinu in the space of one chapter to be the person that is eventually called Ish HaElokim? He's a human being, a man, human being. HaElokim, of the Almighty. That's an amazing title. Very, very few people got that title. You're human, and yet you've got this part of you that is so close to God himself that you're called Ish HaElokim, man of the Almighty. So, interestingly, you are only shown 3 incidents, 3 very short clips about his life before God reveals himself at the burning bush. Incident number 1 is he comes out of the palace where he's raised as a Mitzri, and he sees an Egyptian beating a Jew. This Egyptian had abused the Jew's wife during the night, unbeknownst to the husband, and the husband understood it. This was Dasan and Aviram. This was Aviram, the husband of Shalamit bat Dibri, and Moses sees this Egyptian beating this Jew to death. What does Moshe Rabbeinu do? He kills him. Which bystander is he? Number 1, agrees with the bully. Number 2? Number 3. The next day, this is all in the space of 7 psukim, from Perek base, pasuk, I think it's Zion onwards. In the space of 7 verses, you have this second scenario now being told to us, that the next day, Aviram, the husband whose life was just saved by Moshe Rabbeinu, wants to divorce his wife, and his wife's brother, the brother-in-law to Aviram, is Dasan, and Dasan is getting upset with his brother-in-law who wants to divorce his sister, so he lifts up his hand in what's going to become a physical incident, and just for lifting his hand, the Torah declares, Rasha, you wicked man. Just for lifting your hand to hurt another person, he's already called wicked. That's how we learn that particular extrapolation. And the next words are, Lama tape recha, why are you hitting your brother? And what is Moshe Rabbeinu? Moshe Rabbeinu was the one who says, why are you hitting your brother? He interferes. Oh. Scenario number 2, he's bystander number 3 again. This almost cost him his life because Paro almost killed him for attempting to kill him. Only by Derech Nes, complete miracle, he managed to escape. He arrives in Midian. Midian is today Saudi Arabia. He comes to Midian and he arrives at a well and he sees a whole group of shepherds. Shepherds that tend to be well-built, husky type of characters, and they're about to molest the daughters of Yisrael. Yisrael, their father, was excommunicated. He was denying the validity of all the religions that he had been the high priest of, and he was looking into the possibility that monotheism, really there's only one God. And so he was excommunicated by everybody, or no one was allowed to work for him. So what do you do? In those days, if you had assets, it was sheep and cattle. So his daughters were the shepherdesses of his assets. They arrive at the well, and these men are about to take advantage of these young ladies who are vulnerable. And what does Moshe Rabbeinu say? Oh, I know nothing, and walks away? No! Vayakam, he gets up, Vayoshian, and he saves them. They were so traumatized at the time that they weren't able to get water for their flocks that he ended up providing for them. He took on the whole crowd. Bystander number 3 again. And what do you find next? Literally, a few verses away, God speaks to him at the snare, the burning bush, and says, you are my man. The only thing you know about Moshe Rabbeinu is he is bystander number 3. He will not stand up for injustice. He will not be quiet and silent when there's injustice. Wow. Extraordinary. So let's briefly look at the bully and what bullying really is. There's two types of bullying. One is subjective and one is objective. Subjective means I come home and I tell my mom, my dad, so-and-so bullied me in school today. And what's my subjective interpretation of being bullied? Because she looked at me and I could tell she's... And it's just the way this person looked at me, already I feel bullied, or the words they said. The objective definition of bullying is the imbalance of power that the bully wants to maintain. I'm on top of the victim. I want to maintain the imbalance, and if you try to go up, I'm trying to maintain an imbalance of power. So really, if we understand objectively, the bully is someone who doesn't want the other person to be on par, and I'm better than you. Whether it's because you're too tall, or too small, or too large, or too thin, or you've got glasses, or you don't wear glasses, or you're in fashion hairstyle, or not in fashion. It makes no difference. I don't need a reason. If I'm a bully, I don't necessarily need a reason to choose this particular target as my victim. It can be any reason in the world. But the mechanics is I am maintaining an imbalance of power. So if you just look at me in a certain way, that doesn't necessarily qualify as really bullying. We don't have a chazaka, we don't have a track record here of imbalance of power. But where it's consistent, and there's many different types of bullying. You've got cyberbullying, which is much more recent, and it's the worst type, because the bully doesn't have to have a conscience. He can harm other people with Photoshop. Some people saw a series called 13 Reasons Why, where based on a true story, a teenager commits suicide because her whole world was compromised with pictures which were not even in context, and caused her so much humiliation that she couldn't take it anymore and took her life. And this, unfortunately, is something that's very common. It's happening again and again amongst teenagers, and the more it's talked about, the more suicide is talked about, the more it becomes actually on the menu. Why should we even let teenagers think that that's an option? You have a question?
No.
Oh. So now what we want to do is ask ourselves, where in the Torah do you see the bully? So there's a lot of examples, but I'm looking right now for the definition of a bully in the Torah. And interestingly, it's a roidef. A roidef is someone who's chasing someone else to overpower them or to harm them in some way. And a roidef has very, very unique laws. Astonishing. If you see someone, it could be Jewish and from, who's chasing another person and wants to either molest that lady, for example, or kill that person or harm them in some way, you have a mitzvah to stop that roidef, either by maiming them, if necessary, you shoot them in the legs, and if that won't work, or in the moment the only way to save the victim is to kill the bully. You have a mitzvah to kill the bully to save the life of the victim. You're allowed to take the nefesh of the roidef to save the nefesh, the soul of the nirdaf. Now that is extraordinary. Do you know why? We said much earlier, I'm not here to judge you, so where do I come off? No protocol, no arrest, no warning, and no judges? You don't bring them to court?
Isn't that like this week's parsha with Yosef and his
Yes.
brothers?
Yes.
That's exactly what happened, right?
That's exactly what happened. They paskened that they saw a pattern. Esav happened. Yishmael happened. Yishmael came from Abraham. Esav, who was not as sophisticated as Yishmael, he was Sayyid Bafiv, he was brilliant. He was a bully. He was brilliant in how he would persuade people thinking that he has their interest, when really he was a manipulator, and did terrible things with that Sayyid Bafiv. He manipulated his own father. His mother was not fooled by it because she was used to Lavan and her father, so she recognized the profile. Yitzhak did not see that in his parents. He did not recognize the manipulation. The brothers actually paskened for themselves that since Yosef, not once but twice, has gone to their father with Lashon Hara without clarifying with them and giving them a chance to defend themselves, they said, you know what, he's a Raidif. He's out one-upmanship. He wants to take over. He's going to be the next after Yaakov Vinu. It's only a matter of time. And then his dreams, you're all going to bow down to me? This is it. You join the dots together. It wasn't difficult to understand how they came to the misjudgment that he was Raidif then. And so they passed, and so it was mutter to kill him. It was a mitzvah.
Why is the mitzvah to kill the rodef and not like capture them and give them a chance to tshuva? Why
So
you just kill them right away?
If you see that as a possibility, you definitely have that. You definitely have that as an obligation. In most cases, what the Torah is describing is it's almost like a split-second determination. And if one doesn't maim or kill the Raidef, then the Nirdaf is going to be injured or killed. So that, and that especially, let's say now in the time of war, that's certainly applicable where any enemy has already pre-qualified themselves as I'm a Raidef. Especially they're actually saying what they want to do from the river to the sea. They actually wanted to eliminate an entire nation, and not just us, but even owners of a restaurant. It's not just blurring of lines anymore. So, and that's a form of bullying. That is a form of bullying. Yes.
Sorry to bring a different thing I've learned into this, but yesterday we were learning Tomer Devorah, and the first thing that it talks about is showing restraint when someone like wrongs you.
Right.
So how do you balance that? Because if you're the observer,
Yes.
you have an obligation to step in.
Yes.
If it's happening to you,
Yes.
you have to hold back, right?
If you need to defend yourself, you have to do everything you possibly can to defend yourself.
Yes, but let's just say like bullying. If
Right.
someone is unkind to you or speaking
Yes.
in a not nice way,
Yes. Good question.
you're supposed to hold back, but
Um,
if they're speaking not nicely to someone else, you're supposed to step in.
Excellent question. I have a post, so it's not easy for you to see from here. So I'm gonna show you. There's two pictures here. One picture you see a bully and two bystanders who are like pointing to the victim. But the second picture shows you a completely different scenario, and it's the same people. And I'm going to ask you to note both pictures and see how the second picture is the ultimate solution to bullying, because that's really what I'm going to be working with your students, with your children. You see the first picture? The bully seems to have hit his target. The target is really intimidated. Can you see that? And the second picture, what do you see happening in the second picture?
He doesn't fire his hand like this.
It means nothing to him. So it's a little bit beyond restraint. We're going to talk about that. It won't be today because we're almost at the end. But we will talk about how the Torah gives me, first of all, the vocabulary. And children need the vocabulary. They need the vocabulary to understand what's really bullying subjectively and objectively, and where teasing is going in the wrong direction. Calling names or comparing is going in the wrong. It's not going in the right direction. Because what we'll discover is that the din of a roidef it sounds very extreme, but I'm going to share with you another extreme that helps put this into contrast. But we'll be addressing this point that you brought up about restraint. There's two different types of restraint. I'm going to say this super briefly. There's restraint where you can see that I'm affected, but I'm controlling myself, but I'm still giving points or more ammunition to the bully because he sees I'm affected by his unkind comments. But there's another type of restraint, if you want to call it, where it's a silence from strength. And that's the second picture, where your comments about who I am doesn't change who I am. So that's your opinion of who I am. It doesn't match with my opinion of who I am. You say I have no friends. Maybe that's what you believe is your perspective. So you really think from your perspective I have no friends. But I actually know I do have friends. And if you're going to claim that they're not anyone in school, that's okay. My closest friends are my family. Closest friends, I've got neighbors. So I'm going to match up your reference of me with my reference of me, and I've got to come up with a conclusion. Whose opinion of me is most important? Other people's? Or who I know of myself? So that's like self-estimation, self-esteem from inside out. So we're going to talk about where the Torah actually gives me directives of how to train in asking Hashem to help me be resilient so that I'm not affected by other people's comments or behaviors. It goes very deeply because it's in Shemona Esrei. Right at the end of Shemona Esrei, we actually ask Hashem, but I don't want to go into it now, we actually ask him in two different ways, please help me stand up to those who try to harm me or curse me or tread on me like dust. So we're going to get to that, but that's not for today. It will be Bezrat Hashem next week. The piece I want to close on is we have a very interesting case in the Torah that says that I'm not allowed to call you a nickname. I'm not allowed to use a kinui shem, a nickname. And Shulchan Aruch tells me that is applicable where the nickname is a derogatory nickname. And even if I answer to that, it's still awesome for you to use that nickname of me or anyone else. So it's interesting. What's the problem here? Why is it so? And it's so. How bad is it? Does the person who calls someone a nickname, do they get malchus? Do they get lashes? The answer is no. Do they get mises based in? Do they get the death penalty? No, that's too kind. Excuse me? Ein lo chelek olam haba. He loses his eternity. Whoa! That sounds really extreme. Calling someone a derogatory nickname can lose my eternity? How's that happen?
Because the name is who you are, and that person can think that that's, like your name is your essence. You're by changing their name or calling them that, you're basically also changing what they might think about themselves. So it's like a deeper.
So if I am a loser and I've got no friends and no one will ever love me or like me, what am I capable of? And what if I answer to that and I don't show that I'm not who you think I am, I'm who I think I am, and so whatever you're saying, I'm okay. That's your reality. It's not my reality. So if I let other people get away with that, and they are allowed to get away with it, and teachers allow others to get away with it, then that can go throughout the school career and beyond. And that can lead to much, much worse. There's a lot of fascinating studies. I will be actually sharing a little bit from, I don't know why it is, but the American Secret Service was actually hired by the government to explore, interrogate shooters in high schools who did not commit suicide or failed to commit suicide, and they've been interrogated to understand why and what was their motive. And what was shocking, and this is brought in a book by actually a traditional Jew whose name is Joe Haber. He's called the Bully Guru. He wrote a book called Bully, Proof Your Child. And in it he quotes from the American Secret Service. This is what I'm going to end on because it's fascinating. Basically says the following: what they discovered from 67 shootings, I think it was, that was done over a period of a number of years, they found that almost 70% of the shooters said that they were bullied in school. And they were not shooting inadvertently, even though they were going like this. Here's the reason why. Absolutely mind-boggling. What the study showed is 15% of high schools and public schools in America, 15% of the student body are either bullied or the bullies themselves. That was a huge revelation. Why?
Because why that one person decided it was 15%.
15
It should have been more.
15%.
30% were like going through some trauma during.
Keep thinking.
A lot of bystanders.
Wow, yeah.
85% of the school were bystanders. And the vast majority, and you're hitting higher than 90, were in the first two categories. Either agreed or much more in the second category, were too afraid to stand up because they didn't want to become the next victim. So what the Secret Service came up with in their study, which I thought was a very fascinating conclusion, that it only takes one bystander number 3 to stand up to the bully, And that one bystander will galvanize all the bystander number 2 who are too afraid, because now someone's not afraid. And the more 2, 3, once you've got 1, they said 5% of the bystanders will start siding with bystander number 3 against the bully. You see, think about it this way. If you've got 85% of the class going against the bully, is the bully feeling cool about being a bully? Now he's going to get bullied by 85% of the class. It's not cool. You follow? It's a very simple, almost a mathematical equation, that the power is in the bystanders. Now we can help understand why HaKadosh Baruch Hu made this one human being the greatest human being in world history, all because of his ability to stand up to injustice. There's a lot to be said on the subject. We've hit 1 p.m. Any questions, comments? We're going to continue next week. Yeah.
I'm just going to say,